Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sealand News Brief. Today is August 10th. As usual, first, we want to go over a table of contents. We're going to review mortgage rate. And the first news is $10 billion invested to Post-Authority bus terminal renovation. We're going to talk about details. And next news is New York City may ban tenant criminal screening. The next one is Sunbelt land rush boost prices. It looks like a lot of wealthy people are buying the Sunbelt land. So we call Sunbelt land rush. And the next news we want to talk about is average 30-year fixed mortgage falls to 4.99%. I already announced this to the company Car Talk on Friday. The next news we're going to talk about is American reduce inflation expectation. This sounds positive. The next, virtual real estate closings go mainstream. We'll talk about the online notarization. And the last one, Biden signs $280 billion CHIPS Act. Okay, so let's take a look at mortgage rate. This week went up. 30-year fixed went up to 4.750. And 15-year fixed mortgage went up to 3.999. Okay, and FHA also, FHA actually went down a little bit. And 10-year Treasury yield went up. Of course, we can see the move, okay? This 30-year fixed mortgage and the 10-year Treasury yield kind of synchronized. And the 10-year Treasury yield went up to 2.808 from 2.625. And 5-year mortgage, 5-year ARM went up to 4.75, and 7-year ARM went up to 4.875. Remember last time when 30-year fixed mortgage really hit the ceiling and like close to 6%. At the time, we noticed the difference was close to 1%. Okay. That's why a lot of people thinking of 5-year ARM and 7-year ARM at the time. But now I think it's a bit, the interest went down a bit. 30-year fixed mortgage. We'll cover some news later on. Okay, the first news is $10 billion. Now is going to invest it to Post-Authority bus terminal renovation. The PANYNJ, of course, this Post-Authority New York and New Jersey, announced that they will invest $10 billion to renovate Post-Authority bus terminal. I think we did this news brief sometime last year. And finally, they're going to start. And designated design companies, Foster and Partners in UK and A. Epstein in US, which the A. Epstein in US, they designed the Jacob Javits Center. And the proposed plan includes 5-story bus terminal and 1 million square feet of bus storage area between 9th and 10th Street, and enlarged ramp connecting to Lincoln Tunnel. And surrounding area, the 4 mixed-use buildings they're going to build. And and the construction will begin toward the end of 2023, next year, and will open temporary terminal and ramp in 2028, and finally the project will be completed in 2031. Well, so from next year again, we will have some traffic situation around the bus terminal, but it's worthwhile because bus terminal is right now really jamming, and this new bus terminal will have much larger the spaces and bus storage area, and etc. It is amazing in that really crammed area they can secure this kind of a space, but we have to do it. 그 버스 터미널 42가의 버스 터미널이 개조된다는 소식은 한 1년 전에도 한번 보도된 바가 있는데요. 지금 100억 불인가요? 10 빌리언 달러를 들여서 지금 그 이제 디자인 컴퍼니가 정해졌고요. A. 앱슈타인 미국 회사 그리고 UK 회사 Fosters and Partners 결정이 돼서 시작이 된다. 그리고 앱슈타인 이 회사는 A. 앱슈타인 그 제이콥 제비센터를 디자인하는 회사다. 그래서 버스 터미널이 5층이 되고 1 million square feet 버스 스토리지 에어리아가 생기고 9가와 10가 사이에 그리고 이제 링컨 터널하고 연결되는 이제 램프가 또 만들어지고 그 주위에 한 4개의 믹스드 유즈 빌딩이 또 같이 세워진다. 그래서 2023년에 시작을 해서 2028년에는 템포러리 터미널이 열리고 공사 완공은 31년, 즉 10년 정도 걸리겠죠. 앞으로 또 그 버스 터미널 근처에 큰 변화를 볼 것 같은데 한 2주 전, 3주 전에 했나요? 펜 스테이션도 지금 확장 공사 준비를 하고 있죠. 그래서 지금 메디슨 가든 그 스퀘어 운동장을 다른 데로 옮기는 거죠. 그래서 펜 스테이션이 이제 뚜껑이 열리는 거나 마찬가지죠. 태양광선이 들어오고 이런 지금 프로젝트도 지금 시작이 되죠. 그래서 이 미드타운이 아마 이런 거로는 또 굉장히 revitalize 될 수 있을 것 같다. Next news is New York City may ban tenant criminal screening. And New York City is likely join a member of other cities in limiting the ability of landlords to screen tenants based on their criminal records, which could affect the thousands of people seeking housing in the city. Well, right now in New Jersey, we are sort of allowed to screen the criminal background, criminal record, because typically we use a tenant, we use a site, okay, tenantreports.com, and it has option. You can do criminal record screening if you want. If you pay different pay schedule, you can do that. So still New Jersey, we're practicing screening criminal record. But in New York City, they may ban the criminal record screening. And a bill to be introduced by City Council on Thursday would ban landlords and brokers from seeking a person's criminal record. And so now the landlord cannot say no to the tenant with the prior arrest or conviction record. And mayor also signaled that he is favorable. Well, under this bill, someone who believes they have been discriminated against because of their criminal history could file a lawsuit against the landlord or complain with the NYC Commission on Human Rights. But there could be problem. It is unclear how prepared the city is to enforce the bill's provisions. It already struggles to enforce a law that prevents housing discrimination against people who depend on rental vouchers. In New Jersey, often we call Section 8. I believe New York called the same. Section 8 is a sort of local government program. For instance, in New Jersey, a lot of landlords trying to avoid the Section 8 voucher tenant. Also in New Jersey, same as New York right now, they cannot discriminate. It is tenant with rental voucher, which we call Section 8. But people do. That's a problem. So how are they going to enforce? So already they have this problem, but also on top of that, now they have to enforce the discrimination on against criminal background, criminal record. So that's kind of already it will be some difficulty. 뉴욕시에 지금 그 테넌트들의 크리미널 백그라운드를 스크리닝 보통 하죠. 랜드들이 그거를 못하게 하는 법이 지금 만들어지고 있다. 그런 뉴스가 지금 들어와 있어요. 그런데 문제는 그 이미 이 섹션 8 테넌트들을 디스크리미네이션 못하게 돼 있는데도 불구하고 랜드들이 그렇게 어보이드 하는데 그것도 지금 막기 힘든데 여기다가 또 크리미널 체크하는 것도 할 수 없다 이렇게 되는데 이걸 어떻게 이 법을 그럼 어떻게 인포스 할 것이냐가 굉장히 지금 퀘스천이다 이런 뉴스가 지금 나와 있고요. The next news is Sunbelt land rush boost prices. Well, investors snap up lots near Miami, Phoenix, Austin, Texas, Dallas, etc., and sit back to see if value rises. So they purchase a lot of bare land, okay, and just watch to increase the value. The fast-growing Sunbelt cities are experiencing what we call a land rush, sending investors, moguls, and professional athletes racing to buy empty lots while lifting land value to new heights. For instance, I looked at Phil Mickelson, also looks like one of those investors. Bought lots in the Sunbelt area, the news said. So sales of land last year rose faster than any other major type of commercial real estate across the US, according to NAR. And in Sunbelt, the quarterly number of undeveloped land sales more than doubled over the past 3 years, according to Costa Group's land.com, which is a land listing website. Well, let's take a look at this chart. This is from land.com, which is a Costa Group company. By the way, Costa Group has about 20 different companies. And this shows the number of sales of undeveloped land in Sunbelt state, quarterly statistics. So look at this last like 3 years. This is a quarterly number of sales, okay? It remains this level, but 2001, 2002, it's practically, literally doubled. And the news says more than doubled. So this is the number of land sales in the Sunbelt area. Okay, it's kind of an interesting phenomena. So if you have money, you can run down to Sunbelt area and you purchase land. Then wait for price rises. 그 선벨트 지역은 아시겠죠? 지금 사우스 지역, 마이애미, 뭐 그쪽 피닉스나 어스틴 그리고 뭐 조지아, 알라바마 다 포함될 수 있겠죠. 거기에 유명인들이나 투자자들이 지금 땅을 사들이고 있다. 땅을 사고 값이 올라가는 걸 기다리는 거죠. 제가 신문 잠깐 봤는데 필 미클슨 골프 플레이어도 거기 인볼브 돼 있고 뭐 여러 가지 이제 유명 인사들이 돈이 많으니까 재밌는 거는 땅은 사서 undeveloped죠. 사서 그냥 아무것도 안 하고 기다리는 거죠. 뭐 세금은 내겠죠, 그죠? 그냥 기다리다가 올라가면 파는 거. 그러니까 뭐 수탁이나 뭐 비슷하겠죠. 아니면 뭐 금을 산다든지 그냥 사서 놓고 기다리면 올라가는. 땅도 지금 그런 그 커머디티의 일종이 되겠죠. 이렇게 투자를 한다면. 그래서 지금 NAR에서 보고가 다른 어떤 커머셜 섹터보다도 땅에 투자한 것이 지금 굉장히 빨리 오르고 있다. 코스타에서 우리 코스타 그룹에 land.com이라는 사이트가 있는데 한번 여러분들 관심 있으면 들어가 보세요. 랜드 리스팅만 하는 사이트예요. 저도 사실 잘 몰랐는데 land.com 들어가시면 거기 이제 랜드가 리스팅돼 있는데 거기 그 도표에 본 것처럼 과거 2, 3년 대비 지금 세일 건수가 more than 더블이 올라갔다. 그런 뉴스가 지금 들어가 있고요. Okay, next news is average 30-year fixed mortgage falls to 4.99. As I introduced in the beginning, the fair asset mortgage provides that table, the interest rate table. Of course, I sort of a composite, but usually right now it's already under 5%. But the Fannie Mae surveys average, we're talking, Fannie Mae is, as you know, is a reputable organization. So it says 30-year fixed mortgage rate is now 4.99 this week, down from 5.3% a week earlier. In fact, the last Wednesday CWM meeting, we said interest rate went down to 5.3. But after Wednesday, it happened, falls to 4.99. And they have fallen swiftly in recent weeks from their 13-year high of 5.81%. So it hit the record 5.81%. It was a 13-year high in June, but now it's coming down below 5%. So I think we are going to be okay, because it's not crazy interest rate. But okay, the rapid changes in mortgage rate are likely to continue. Well, ups and downs will be likely to continue as economists debate whether to be more concerned about inflation and a recession. So especially high uncertainty surrounding inflation and other factors will likely cause rates to remain variable. So it can be up, it can be down, especially as the Fed attempts to navigate the current economic environment. Freddie Mac chief economist said, especially Fed trying to manage or trying to control the inflation and economic situation, environment, then it has more probability of ups and down rapid changes. 오케이. 지금, 모기지 이자율이 5.81%까지 올라갔었는데, 그게 13년 만에 기록이었고, 그런데 지금 전번 주에는 5.3%로 떨어지고, 그 다음에 이번 주에는 4.99까지 지금 30년 고정이 떨어져 있다. 그래서 괜찮은 것 같아요. 그죠? 너무 바이어들을 겁주지 않도록. 그러나 역시 이제 체인지는 있을 수 있다. 특히 페드가 지금 컨트롤하려고 이렇게 애를 쓰면 쓸수록 이자율은 더 변화가 있을 수 있다. 그런 지금 얘기를 계속 하고 있고요. 오케이. Next, the Americans reduce inflation expectations. That's, I think, it's good news. Okay. Of course, it's a consumer psychology. Like everybody's expectation. It's not scientific or not it's official data, but it's expectation. Americans are expecting less inflation in coming years, according to a recent survey by a Fed Bank of New York. There are 12 regional banks, right? Central banks in US. So one of them is in New York. And the respondents' median expectation in July was for annual inflation rate of 6.2% in 1 year. So within a year, inflation rate will be 6.2%. That's what median expectation. That is actually down from 6.8% they expected in June. So June, the people saying within a year, the inflation rate becomes 6.8%. But July, they're saying within a year, inflation rate becomes 6.2%. That's what they're saying. And they expected inflation in 3 years to be 3.2%. Okay, they're talking about 1 year projection, but also the end of the survey says, what about in 3 years? Okay, then people's expectation is 3.2% and down from 3.6% in June. And the inflation in 5 years to be 2.3%. So in 5 years, we're going to go back to pretty much normal 2.3% range, down from previous 2.8%. And if we take a look at this chart here, okay, 1 year projection. In other words, from this time on, within a year, the inflation rate will become 6.2%. That's what people's expectation. And in 3 years, after we going through this period, and 3 years, interest rate becomes 3.2%. Okay. So I think right now it's 9% inflation, the range, but within a year or within 3 years, and even within 5 years, we're going back to pretty much normal and pretty much what the Fed want to achieve, which is 2% inflation rate. And actually, the economists don't see consumer expectation as a formal forecast. Okay, this is what consumer thinks. Okay, what consumer expect. Okay, but pay attention to such surveys as a sign of a popular psychology, and that can influence price pressures. Well, I think you heard this kind of expression. Economy is psychology. Okay, if economy is what the people think, okay, so that's what they're talking about here. And Fed Reserve officials believe expectation of higher inflation can be self-fulfilling, causing people to pay higher prices and press for higher wages in anticipation of higher costs in the future, causing inflation to accelerate. So expectation the expectation of inflation is low. Okay, that means good. That means the actual consumer's behavior can follow that expectation. 이 미국 분들 전체, 미국 우리 평범한 미국 사람들, 컨슈머 입장에서 그러니까 인플레이션이 앞으로 어떻게 될 거라고 예상하는 것이 지금 1년 안에 6.2%가 될 것이다. 근데 그 expectation 레벨이 준에는 6.8%였다. 근데 지금 이제 줄라이에 와서 6.2%를 내려갔다. 그리고 in 3 year에는 어떻게 될 거냐 예상을 했을 때에 준에는 3.6%가 될 거라고 예상했는데 지금 줄라이에는 3.2%가 될 것이다. 앞으로 3 year에. 그리고 5 year에는 어떻게 될 것이냐 예상을 한 것이 2.3%. 그것도 준보다 아무튼 떨어졌다. 준에는 2.8%였다. 그 컨슈머들이 그냥 생각하는 거, expectation 하는 게 어떤 포멀한 포캐스트는 아니다. 그럼에도 불구하고 경제학자들은 거기에 관심을 갖는다. 왜 그러냐 하면 그 경제는 쉽니다. 이런 얘기를 들어보셨죠? 그래서 올라갈 거라고 예상을 하는 거하고 떨어질 거라고 예상을 하는 거하고 그 다음에 이 비헤이비어가 달라질 수 있기 때문에 물건을 사고 뭐 안 사고 뭐 여러 가지로 그런 그 셀프 풀필링 하는 기능이 있을 수 있기 때문에 그렇다. The next news is virtual real estate closings go mainstream. Real estate closings can now take place remotely in most states. A shift that accelerated as much of life moved online during the pandemic. And mortgage lenders are pushing the remaining states to come on board too, though lawmakers have reservation. Well, what is virtual real estate closings? Well, I think we are doing partially right now because a lot of documentation can be signed by e-sign. So we don't go to closing, for instance. And the only problem is identification. In other words, are you a real buyer if they don't come to the closing table? Okay. And the remote video conferencing. Really, that buyer is that person. That's the most critical point. So notarization comes to the picture, okay? And so how the notarization will perform remotely, okay? So these days, there are a couple of protocols. They verify remotely that person's identification. It's called RON, Remote Online Notarization. Okay, so already there is available notarization. I'm the public notary, and our branch office managers are public notaries. And but I didn't apply remote online notary yet. But there is a method to identify who you are. So if that happens, then we don't have to come to the closing. All remotely video by the video conferencing, we can do the closing. Well, the most important thing is also what? Money, right? Lenders. So lender says it's okay, then pretty much okay. So right now, this what it's saying about 43 states now allowing remote online notarization. And but federal level, they have some reservation. So in the House, the passes the Security Notarization Act, which would allow notaries nationwide to perform the remote online notarizations. The bill is now moved to the Senate. So that's kind of a federal level move. 그 비대면 클로징이 지금 대세로 등장한다 이런 타이틀을 가지고 월스트리트저널에서 보고했는데요. 결국 우리가 클로징에 직접 안 가고 e-사인으로 다큐멘테이션 다 하고 하는데 가장 중요한 두 가지가 렌더가 어떻게 이제 베리파이 하느냐, 누구를 바이어가 진짜 바이어냐, 셀러가 진짜 셀러냐 이런 것들. 그래서 리모트 온라인 노트라이제이션 RON이라고 그러거든요. RON. 그것이 지금 등장한다. 그래서 그걸 리걸라이즈 하는 스테이트도 있고 안 하는 스테이트도 있는데 한 43개 스테이트에서는 그것을 리걸라이즈 했다. 그러나 페더럴 레벨에서는 지금 법을 준비 중에 있다. 지금 많이들 그렇게 움직이고 있는 거죠. Okay, and I believe it is the last news. So Biden signs $280 billion CHIPS Act. According to this act, will boost domestic high-tech manufacturing, the part of his administration's push to boost the U.S. competitiveness over China. The target is China. And this act called CHIPS and Science Act. So 280 billion is a lot of money. And he want to boost the chip making, the semiconductor chip. So I think Korean companies also will get benefit. And the White House immediately selling the immediate impact to the semiconductor measure. And especially like Micron, as a leading US chip manufacturer, will announce $40 billion plan to boost production of memory chips, while Qualcomm and Global Foundries will unveil $4.2 billion expansion of upstate New York chip plant. Also, you can watch out where the semiconductor chips located: East Fishkill and Malta, New York. And so it's good news. It's going to be good news. And so far, I think a few decades, America was lagging the semiconductor business, but now they want to do something. All the manufacturers and foundries, etc., the marketing companies, they will get this benefit called the CHIPS and Science Act. And then target is China. 그 미국 정부에서 지금 2,800억 불 규모의 기술 투자 인준을 했는데요. 지금 그 바이든 애드민이 굉장히 성공했다 하는 작품으로 지금 내세우고 있는데, 중국을 겨냥해서 중국이 너무 지금 커지고 있으니까 이 칩 비즈니스도 마찬가지. 한국하고는 뭐 우리 미국이 잘 협조하고 있으니까 이제 한국도 이 베네핏을 볼 거고요. 엄청난 돈이 지금 52 빌리언이라는 돈이 그 컴퓨터 칩 섹터에 이제 그 데지그네이트 될 것이다. 그리고 뉴욕 쪽에도 퀄컴이나 이 글로벌 파운드리 이제 이 칩을 디자인하는 쪽이 있고 또 칩을 만들어내는 쪽이 있거든요. 공장에서 뭐 클린룸, 어마어마한 시설을 가지고 만들어야 되는데 미국이 굉장히 약했는데, 글로벌 파운드리라고 하는 이 회사도 4.2 빌리언 달러 익스펜션 할 거고, 뉴욕에 칩 플랜트가 이 사람들이 있다. 이스트 피시킬이 있고요. 그다음에 말타, 뉴욕에 이 사람들의 파운드리가 있다. 그런 뉴스가 지금 들어와 있고요. 오케이. 여기까지 이번 뉴스는 마치고요. Okay, so these are the news brief this week, and thank you for joining, and we'll see you next week.